we've created and used a class style, let's work on a tag style. Now, in this page, we already have a tag style here, the H1 tag, styling this headline, Galapagos Tortoise. Let's make that an H2. And here's another thing to kind of get used to as you think about styles. I'm applying a regular old HTML tag here, the heading 2 tag. And at this point, I haven't created a style for heading 2. Now, the font is different from the default because the page has a style that's affecting the font. So the body tag here is instructing that everything on the page be Verdana unless there's another style that overrides it. So if I create a style for the H2 tag that has a different font, it's going to change the font here, even though the body tag includes a style definition rule for Verdana. You'll see how that works as we go along. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a new style, just like we created that class style. And now Dreamweaver is automatically assuming that I might want to create a compound style for the H2 tag, because when I had my cursor in this headline, it was inside these other tags. Again, that's a very specific style, and you really only need to do that if you want to limit where that H2 will apply. If you want to create a tag style that will change the appearance of anything formatted with the H2 tag anywhere in your site, then you can delete all of that extra information and just define an H2 tag. If you do that, make sure you specify that this is a tag selector style. So I've selected tag selector. I have H2 here. If you don't have your cursor there or there's something else, remember you can always select the tag from the drop-down list. And in this case, I am going to go ahead and include this new style in my external style sheet. So Dreamweaver has already selected the external style sheet attached to this page. All I need to do now is click OK. Now let's define a style for this. Let's make this one large instead of extra large. The H1 was extra large, so it would make sense that the H2 would be somewhat smaller, in this case large. Now I don't need to add bold to this because the heading tags already include bold in the definition of the tag itself. So the H1, H2, H3 HTML tags make text big and bold. All I want to do here is adjust the size to a slightly smaller size than the default that comes with the H2 tag, and using large will do that. And I'm going to change the color too. So let's make this a nice dark blue color. And let's also change the font. So I'm going to make the font for this Georgia, and remember we've got a font collection here, so if Georgia's not on my user's computer, it'll show up in Times. But that's going to change the font of this headline so that it's no longer Verdana like the rest of the page. Now watch this. Because that H2 is already applied to that headline, as soon as I create this style, that headline will change. And if you want to test how it looks before you even close this dialog, you can use the Apply button instead of the OK button. So if I click Apply, you see right away, Georgia, large, blue. If I want to change it again, maybe make it a darker blue, I can apply, see how it looks. No, I like the lighter blue better. So you see, using this Apply button, you can do a little experimenting before you're finished with the style. When you click OK, you close the dialog, and the new style appears here in your external style sheet. So we now have styles for the H1 tag and the H2 tag. By the way, you can move styles around in this CSS Styles panel by simply clicking and dragging to move them. This is a feature that doesn't exist in earlier versions of Dreamweaver. If you're using Dreamweaver 8 or before, you won't be able to do this. But in Dreamweaver CS3 and CS4, you can rearrange and rename styles using the Styles panel. So I have an H1 style and I have an H2 style that are different. And let me show you how you might use both on the same page. So let's add another headline here. Can you believe these turtles live to be 100? Gosh, that turtle alone makes me want to go to the Galapagos. Although I have to say, probably the last thing the Galapagos needs right now is more human visitors. So I'm just going to enjoy this beautiful photo that my friend Ken took and admire him from afar. Now, this headline isn't formatted. So if I want to apply that H2 style to this headline, then I need to apply the H2 tag. And when I apply the H2 tag, using the drop-down list in the Properties Inspector, as I would apply any other H2 tag, it will automatically include the style information because I've redefined that style. Similarly, if I want to change the style on this headline back to H1, you can just put your cursor anywhere in the headline, come down here, choose the H1 tag, and you'll see now I have my headline 1 and my headline 2, and separate styles for each of those. Now, in addition to being able to edit these styles using the CSS panel, I want to show you one other way you can edit styles. If I expand the Properties Inspector here at the bottom of the page, I want you to see the new CSS option in the Properties Inspector is a very handy place to make quick changes to things like headline styles. So if I want to change that H1 to a different color, to a different font, to a different size, I can do so here in the Property Inspector just as easily as I could do so using the Properties pane in the CSS Styles panel or by double-clicking on the style. And I want you to notice here, if you don't click carefully in the CSS Styles panel, you'll select the name as if you're going to rename it. And at that point, double-clicking won't have any effect. So just click off of it and double-click again, and you should be able to open the CSS rule definition dialog. We'll come back to what it means to rename styles at the end of Chapter 6, but I want to warn you to be very careful not to rename styles in the CSS Styles panel, because that will break the connection to how those styles are applied here. The name in the code needs to match the name in the CSS Styles panel, and you want to be very careful not to accidentally rename a style here. So you can change the style definition using the Properties Inspector as kind of a new option here in Dreamweaver CS4 that didn't exist before. Very handy for making quick changes to things like these tag styles, but you can also use it for any of the other styles in your site. One last thing about using tag styles versus using class styles or other kinds of styles. I created a class style for this caption because there isn't really an HTML tag called caption. And there are a number of ways that I could have handled this styling. But when you're doing something that's completely new, it makes some sense to create a class style for it. However, when you're working on things like headlines and subheadlines, like this H1 and this H2, there are some extra benefits to redefining the heading tags instead of creating completely new styles. And that comes from the fact that the H1 tag, the H2 tag, the H3, and really up to H6, being the smallest of the 6, have a number of sort of added value advantages in web design. And it comes from the fact that people have been using heading 1 through heading 6 tags since the beginning of web design. And for that reason, they're really well recognized on the internet. Browsers know right away if something's formatted in an H1, it's probably one of the most important pieces of information on the page. Similarly, people who use screen readers get additional information by the value of that tag. You know anything formatted with an H1 should be the most important thing on the page. And finally, but not insignificantly, many search engines will put higher priority on keywords that appear in the H1 tag because they assume that anything formatted with that tag is the most important text on the page. So those are just a few of the reasons why using H1 tags have added value. And you're better off redefining the H1 tag whenever you can rather than creating a completely new style.